Hi, I'm Carl Weber. Welcome to Video Aided Instructions English Grammar Series. This is the program on spelling and capitalization. Of all the languages in the world, English may be the most difficult to spell. In some other languages, Italian, for instance, each letter represents only one sound. So if you know how to say a word in Italian, you know how to spell it. In English, however, the relationship between sound and spelling is unpredictable. For example, in the following words, the sound of O is represented by 10 different letters or combinations of letters. So, so, O, do, bow, soak, and soul. And the same letter may represent many different sounds in English. For example, in these words, the letter O represents 7 different sounds. So, to, on, honey, horse, women, burrow. No wonder English is hard to spell. Perhaps you wonder why someone hasn't tried to fix English spelling by making it match the pronunciations of words. Actually, some people have tried. Such well-known figures as the playwright George Bernard Shaw, the novelist Mark Twain, and the dictionary maker Noah Webster have all proposed simplified systems for spelling English. None of these systems have been adopted, however. There are several reasons. First, if words are to be pronounced as they are spelled, whose pronunciation will we follow? As you know, English sounds very different in New York City, Liverpool, England, Atlanta, Georgia, Bombay, India, and Sydney, Australia. If we had different spelling systems for every style of pronunciation, communication would be more difficult, not easier. Furthermore, if children were to learn a new system of spelling, they would find it hard or impossible to read the millions of existing books that are printed with traditional spelling, and it would cost billions of dollars to convert and reprint those books. For these reasons, the crazy spelling of English is simply something that we have to live with, like traffic jams or bad weather. In this lesson, you'll learn some rules and techniques that will make it easier for you to spell English words correctly. And when you're still in doubt, consult a dictionary. There are quite a few words in English that are hard to spell. Luckily, it's not necessary to learn each of these words individually. Some of the hard words fall into groups that can be learned together. In this lesson, we'll look at a few rules that can help you remember how to spell some of these groups of hard words. Our first rule deals with the letter combination IE or EI. Many words in English contain these combinations, but it's not always easy to remember whether to use IE or EI in a particular word. Our first rule takes the form of a little poem that can help you remember. Here's how it goes. I before E, except after C, or when sounded like A, as in neighbor and way. Let's take a closer look at this rule. It tells you that IE is usually correct, I before E. However, when the letter combination comes after the letter C, then EI is used instead. So, for example, a word like receive is spelled R-E-C-E-I-V-E. Because the letter combination comes after the letter C, EI is correct. Furthermore, we use EI when the sound of the vowel combination is A. For example, in the word neighbor or the word way. In both of those words, the letter combination sounds like A, and therefore it's spelled EI rather than IE. Now, there are a few other English words that are exceptions to this rule, words that use EI, even though they don't follow the letter C, nor does it sound like A. You can remember most of the most common words that are exceptions to this rule if you memorize this rather strange sentence. Here it is. Neither leisurely, foreign chic seized their weird height. Does this sentence make a lot of sense? Not really, but it is easy to remember, and it's a good way to make a note of these exceptional words in English which are spelled EI even though they don't fit into our rhyming rule. Our next rule has to do with the sound able or ible, which comes at the end of many words. It means able to be done. Now, it sometimes can be difficult to remember whether to spell this suffix able or ible. Here are a couple of rules that will help you distinguish able words from ible words. The ending is usually ible if the root is not a complete word. For example, look at the word credible. This means able to be believed. It comes from a Latin root credere, which means to believe. But in English, the root cred is not a complete word. No one could use the word cred in English. Since it's not a complete word, ible would be the expected spelling, and that is correct. So credible is spelled with ible, not able. Other examples in English include impossible and plausible, because impos and plaus are not complete words in English. Now, there's another group of words that are also commonly spelled ible rather than able. These are words where the root ends in ns, ss, soft c, or soft g. Examples include defensible, admissible, enforceable, and legible. Because the root in these cases ends with that soft sound, ible is also correct. Otherwise, words with this suffix usually are spelled with able. So in this rule, we've defined two groups of words that usually end in ible. Otherwise, able is correct. Our next rule deals with another common ending, efy or iffy. There are 4 words in English that end in efy. Memorize these 4 and you'll know how to spell them correctly. They are liquefy, which means to make liquid, putrefy, which means to rot, rarefy, which means to make more rare or more pure, and stupefy, which means to make something or someone stupid or dull. Those 4 words are spelled efy. Other words with the same suffix are spelled with ify. For example, magnify, beautify, and identify. So when you have a word that ends with this sound, you would usually spell it ify. Only the 4 exceptions with efy need to be memorized. And our last rule also deals with commonly confused endings. These are all endings that sound like seed. Once again, we have a group of exceptional words that you can memorize, and otherwise all the other words that have that seed ending will fall into a single category. Here's the rule. 3 words end in C-E-E-D. Those 3 words are exceed, proceed, and succeed. 1 word ends in S-E-D-E, supersede. All other words that end with the seed sound are spelled with C-E-D-E. For example, concede, recede, and precede. Again, if you memorize the words that are exceptions to the general principle, you shouldn't have too much difficulty with these seed words. Okay, the rules you've learned in this lesson will help you spell many dozens of English words. Do you think you've mastered them? Turn to your study guide, in which we've provided an exercise which will test your knowledge of these rules. In this exercise, we provided you with 5 sentences, some of which contain spelling errors. Your job is to locate any spelling errors and correct them, and you are allowed to use a dictionary if you find that helpful. Let's look at the first sentence. The telescope at the City Observatory can magnify images from space thousands of times, making distant stars and galaxies clearly visible. Now, in this sentence, there are 2 spelling errors. Did you catch both of them? The first one is magnify. Magnify in this sentence was spelled with E-F-Y. But remember, there are only 4 words in English that end in E-F-Y, and magnify isn't one of them. The correct spelling is I-F-Y. The second error is the word visible. Here, the suffix able was spelled with an A, V-I-S-A-B-L-E. This is incorrect. Remember that if the root is not a complete word in English, the usual spelling is I-B-L-E. Viz is not a complete word in English, and therefore I-B-L-E would be the expected spelling, and that would be correct in visible. Let's look at the next sentence. After entering the auditorium, the members of the graduating class are supposed to proceed directly to their seats. Here, seed has been spelled S-E-D-E in the word proceed, but that's wrong. Remember that S-E-D-E is used in only one word in English, supersede. Proceed is one of the group of words, 3 words, that are spelled with C-E-E-D. Remember, those 3 words are exceed, proceed, and succeed. Therefore, the correct spelling of proceed is P-R-O-C-E-E-D, and that's a spelling error you should have caught in this sentence. Next example. Yesterday, I received a package in the mail that was supposed to be delivered to my next-door neighbor. Now, in this sentence, we have 2 words that use the IE or EI combination of letters. Are they spelled correctly? Well, one is correct and one isn't. First, we have the word received, which is spelled IE in this case. Is that correct? No, it's wrong. Remember our rule, I before E except after C. In this case, the word received contains the IE combination after the letter C, and therefore I should not come before E, but instead the other way around. EI is correct in the word received, so this word is spelled wrong in this sentence. What about the word neighbor? Neighbor is spelled with EI, and that's correct, because remember that when the vowel combination is sounded like A, as in neighbor and way, E comes before I. So in this sentence, one of the words with the IE, EI combination is spelled incorrectly, one correctly. Our next example. During the early stages of the war, some feared that Hitler's armies were practically invincible, and a few were ready to concede defeat. Now there are 2 tricky words in this sentence. Let's see whether you were able to spell them correctly. The first one is invincible. That includes that suffix able or ible, which can sometimes be difficult. Is I-B-L-E the correct spelling as it's done here? Well, remember that when the root ends with a soft C sound, that is a C that sounds like an S, then I-B-L-E is normally correct. Therefore, the I-B-L-E spelling in this case is correct because invincible, the root there, invince, ends with that soft C sound, the C that sounds like an S. So I-B-L-E is the correct spelling, and the sentence is right so far. What about the word concede? We've seen that that seed ending can be tricky. Well, C-E-D-E is the most common spelling for the seed ending. We saw that there are just 4 words that don't fit that rule, and concede is not one of them. So concede is correctly spelled in this sentence with the C-E-D-E ending. All the words in this sentence are correct. There's no error here. Last example. As darkness fell over the mountains, the weird cry of a distant coyote was faintly audible. Once again, there are 2 possibly tricky words in this sentence. Are they spelled correctly or incorrectly? Let's take a look. First, we have the word weird, which contains the IE or EI combination. Remember that weird is one of the words that shows up in our little sentence, the sentence which is designed to remind you of words that are spelled EI, even though they don't fit into the rule. The sentence is, neither leisurely foreign chic seized their weird height. The word weird is in that sentence, and that's there to remind you that it's spelled EI, not IE. So in this sentence, it's incorrect and would need to be fixed. What about the word audible? Again, that A-B-L-E or I-B-L-E ending can be tricky. Remember our rule that when the root is not a complete word in English, very often I-B-L-E is the correct spelling. Is aud a complete word in English? Not at all. Therefore, we would expect audible to be spelled with I-B-L-E, and that is, in fact, the correct spelling. So audible is correctly spelled in this sentence. Weird is not. Prefixes are syllables that are added to the beginning of words or word roots to change their meaning. Suffixes are syllables added to the ends of words or word roots to change their meaning. As we've already seen, both prefixes and suffixes can pose tricky spelling challenges. In this lesson, we'll look at some rules that will help. Let's begin with the prefix in. It usually means not. For example, take the word visible, which means able to be seen. When you add the prefix in front of that word, it becomes invisible, which means not able to be seen. Now, when added to a word starting with the letter L, the in of in changes to il. So, for example, the word illegal is spelled I-L-L-E-G-A-L. Legal begins with L, and so therefore when we want to add in front of that word, the in turns into il. Illegal means not legal. Similarly, when we want to add the prefix in front of the word literate, the in turns into il, and the word becomes illiterate, which means not able to read and write. In also changes when it's added to a word starting with M or P. In this case, the in becomes im. So, for example, when we want to add the prefix in, meaning not, to the word mortal, in becomes im, immortal. Someone who does not die is immortal. When we add in to mature, it becomes im, immature. And when we add in to the word possible, it also becomes im, impossible, that is, not able to be done. So the prefix in, when it's added to the front of words, usually means not, and in most cases, it's a simple matter of adding the in. But when the word or word root begins with L, M, or P, the in changes, and you need to know that in order to spell the words correctly. Here's a rule that deals with a suffix. When you add a suffix that begins with a vowel to a word that ends in silent E, you drop the E. Many words in English end with an E that is not pronounced, a silent E. When you add a suffix that begins with a vowel to such a word, the silent E simply disappears. Now, suffixes that begin with vowels include able, ing, er, and various others. So this is a rule that comes up quite often. Look at this example. Let's take the verb to move. It ends with a silent E. Although the E is there, we don't pronounce it. We don't say move in English, simply move. It's as if the E wasn't present. So we consider it a silent E. Now, what if we want to add the suffix ing to the word move and turn it into moving? According to our rule, because the suffix begins with the vowel I, we drop the silent E, and moving is spelled moving. Or to take another example, suppose we want to add the suffix able to the word move to create the word movable, meaning able to be moved. Once again, we drop the silent E, and the word movable is correctly spelled movable. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this rule. The most common exception is as follows. When you add a suffix that begins with the letter A to a root that ends in CE or GE, you don't drop the silent E. And there's a special reason why this is the case. But first, let's look at a couple of examples. Take the word noticeable. Noticeable is created by adding the suffix able to the root or word notice. It means able to be noticed. Because of our rule, since this root ends in CE, we don't drop the silent E, and we spell noticeable N-O-T-I-C-E-A-B-L-E. Similarly, the word vengeance is spelled V-E-N-G-E-A-N-C-E because it's created by adding the suffix A-N-C-E, which begins with the letter A, to the root venge, which ends with G-E. In this case, once again, we don't drop the silent E. The reason for this exception to the rule is that if you were to eliminate the silent E from a root that ends in CE or GE, it might make the resulting word difficult to pronounce. For example, if noticeable were spelt without the silent E after C, it might at first glance look as though the C is a hard C, and as though the word ought to be pronounced notacable or notacable, and that would be wrong. So the E makes it clear to the reader that the C or G is soft and ought to be pronounced that way. And that's the technical reason for this exception to the rule. Here's another rule that deals with spelling suffixes. When you add a suffix that begins with a vowel to a one-syllable word that ends with a single vowel and a single consonant, double the consonant. This is a complicated rule, so let's look at each part of the rule separately. First of all, we're talking about one-syllable words. So these are short words that contain only one basic sound. Next, we're talking about one-syllable words that end in a vowel and a consonant, a single vowel and a single consonant. So if the word ends with more than one consonant, such as jump, for example, which ends with MP, this rule would not apply. Or if the word contains two vowels before a single consonant, such as the word leap, L-E-A-P. Again, the rule would not apply because of those two vowels, E-A. This rule only applies to a one-syllable word that ends in one vowel and one consonant. When that's the case, and you're adding a suffix that begins with a vowel, you double the consonant. For example, let's take the word run. Run is a one-syllable word which ends with one vowel and one consonant. The last two letters in the word are U and N. Therefore, the rule applies. So if we're going to add a suffix that begins with a vowel to run, we would double the N. So for example, suppose we want to add the suffix er, meaning one who. A runner is one who runs. We need to double the N, and runner is spelled R-U-N-N-E-R. In the same way, if we want to add the suffix ing and turn run into running, we double the N, and the word would be spelled R-U-N-N-I-N-G. Here's one more suffix rule. When you add a suffix to a word that ends in Y, the Y usually becomes I. Here are some examples. Take the word beauty, which ends in Y. Suppose you want to add the suffix full to mean full of beauty, beautiful. The Y in beauty becomes an I, and beautiful is spelled as you see it. Let's take the word crazy. That also ends in Y. Suppose you want to add the suffix ness and turn it into the word craziness to describe the state of things being crazy. Craziness would be spelled with an I. The Y at the end of crazy turns into an I. One more example. The word identify ends in a Y. If you want to add the suffix cation to it and turn it into identification, which means something that names or identifies a person, the Y once again turns into an I, and identification is spelled as you see. Do you think you've mastered these rules about prefixes and suffixes? You can listen to the lesson again if necessary. If you think you understand these rules, try your hand at the exercise, which allows you to test your understanding of the rules. When you finish the questions, come back and we'll take a look at them together. In this exercise, we gave you 10 words and asked you to add a particular prefix or suffix to the word, and then see if you could spell it correctly. Let's look at these 10 examples together. First, trace plus ing. Well, remember that when you add a suffix that begins with a vowel to a word that ends with silent E, the E usually disappears. So tracing would be spelled T-R-A-C-I-N-G. The silent E disappears. Second example, in plus mobile. Mobile means able to move. In means not. So when we add those two elements together, it creates a word that means not able to move. Now, in added to a word that begins with M normally changes into IM. And sure enough, the correct way to spell the word would be immobile. I-M-M-O-B-I-L-E. It's a word that means unable to move. Next example, loneliness. Here we have a word lonely that ends in a Y, and we've asked you to add the suffix N-E-S-S to it to describe the state of being lonely. Well, remember, when you add a suffix to a word that ends in Y, the Y normally turns into an I. So the correct way to spell loneliness is L-O-N-E-L-I-N-E-S-S. Next, we've given you the verb hit and asked you to add the suffix able to it. Something that is hittable would be something that can be hit. For example, in baseball, a pitch that comes right down the middle of the plate is usually easy for the batter to hit, and it would be described as a hittable pitch. Well, remember that when you're adding a suffix that begins with a vowel, such as A-B-L-E, to a one-syllable word that ends in one vowel and one consonant, the consonant is usually doubled. That's what we have to do here. The word hit is a one-syllable word that ends in the vowel I and the consonant T. So when we're adding the suffix able to it, we need to double the T, and the resulting word would be spelled H-I-T-T-A-B-L-E. Next, logical plus the prefix in. Something that's logical is reasonable. It makes sense. In means not, so something that's not illogical would be described by the new word that we create. Now remember, when we add in to a word that begins with L, the in normally turns into il. So the correct spelling of the resulting word would be illogical. I-L-L-O-G-I-C-A-L. Next, we have the word limp, and we've asked you to add the suffix ing to it. Now remember our rule. When you're adding a suffix that begins with a vowel to a one-syllable word that ends with a single vowel and a single consonant, you would normally double the consonant. Does that rule apply here? Well, limp is a one-syllable word, but it doesn't end with a single vowel and a single consonant. It ends with a vowel I followed by two consonants, MP. Therefore, no doubling is necessary, and when we add ing, there's really no change in the spelling of the word. The final spelling of the correct word limping is L-I-M-P-I-N-G. Next example, adore plus A-T-I-O-N. Here we're adding a suffix to a word that ends with a silent E, and the suffix begins with a vowel, ation. Therefore, the silent E needs to be dropped, and the resulting word adoration should be spelled A-D-O-R-A-T-I-O-N. Our next word is fly plus ER. Now remember that when a suffix is added to a word that ends in Y, the Y normally turns into an I. So the word flyer, which means one who flies, would be spelled F-L-I-E-R. The Y turns into an I when a suffix is added. Next, tangible with the prefix in or in added. Something that's tangible is something that can be touched or felt. Anything that's material and physical would normally be described as tangible. Something that is not tangible would be intangible. And there's no change in spelling to the prefix. Remember, the prefix in changes its spelling when it is added to a word that begins in L, M, or P, not when it's added to a word that begins with T. So the correct spelling of intangible is I-N-T-A-N-G-I-B-L-E. Finally, trace plus able. Something that is traceable is able to be traced. Now, trace ends with a silent E, so your immediate thought might be, well, let's eliminate the silent E, since we're adding a suffix that begins with a vowel. But remember our exception. When you add a suffix that begins with the letter A to a root that ends in CE or GE, you don't drop the silent E. So the correct way to spell traceable is T-R-A-C-E-A-B-L-E. Remember that if the silent E were dropped in this case, it might be difficult to pronounce the resulting word. And if you eliminate the silent E from traceable, the word might look as though it should be pronounced trackable, which would be incorrect. So the silent E needs to be retained in this particular word. Did you get all of the questions in this exercise right? I hope so. If you're ready, move on to the next lesson. People often make spelling errors when they write a word that sounds the same or almost the same as another word with a different meaning and a different spelling. In this lesson, we'll look at some of the most commonly confused words and explain how you can tell them apart and therefore spell them correctly. First, there are a couple of words that sound like accept. They're spelled differently and have different meanings. To accept, spelled A-C-C-E-P-T, is a verb meaning to take. Except, E-X-C-E-P-T, can be used as either a verb or a preposition. When it's used as a verb, it means to exclude. When it's used as a preposition, which is more common, it means other than. Except for the weather, I enjoyed the picnic. Here are two words that sound like access. A-C-C-E-S-S, access means availability. E-X-C-E-S-S means too much of something. Two words that sound different but have related meanings and therefore are often confused are advice and advise. Advice, spelled with a C, is a noun. Advise, with an S, is a verb. When someone gives you some advice, C, they advise you, with an S. The words affect and effect sound almost the same, but they're spelled differently and have different meanings. A-F-F-E-C-T, affect, is usually used as a verb, and it means to influence. The weather may affect your mood. Effect, spelled with an E, E-F-F-E-C-T, is usually used as a noun, meaning influence. The weather can have an effect on your mood. Effect is also used as a verb, meaning to accomplish. The president effected a change in tax policy, meaning the president accomplished a change in tax policy. So be careful which of these words you're using and be sure to spell correctly. Here are two words that sound practically the same, coarse and coarse. Coarse with an A is an adjective meaning rough. For example, the hair on the back of a horse's neck is usually coarse. Course, spelled with a U, means direction, or it can mean a subject at school. What English course are you taking next year? The words complement and complement are spelled slightly differently and have somewhat different meanings. Complement, with an E in the middle, is a verb meaning to complete. Compliment, with an I, is a verb meaning to praise. You might compliment, with an I, your friend on her dress. And if she chooses a bag and shoes that go with the dress perfectly and complete the outfit, you could say, oh, those shoes really complement your outfit, spelled with an E. Phase and phase are two different words with different spellings and different meanings. Phase, F-A-Z-E, means to daunt or overwhelmed. He was really phased by all the work he had to do. Phase, spelled P-H-A-S-E, is a noun that means period. One phase of your life gives way to another. The word its and its are spelled almost the same, except that one contains an apostrophe, and they have an important difference in meaning. Its, without an apostrophe, is a possessive pronoun, which means of it. The cat hurt its paw, meaning the paw of it, of the cat. Its with an apostrophe means it is. When you use it's in a sentence, always ask yourself, could I substitute the words it is for its? If so, then you mean it's with an apostrophe, and you need to insert the apostrophe. Otherwise, leave the apostrophe out. Here's a group of three words that people often get tangled up in. First, we have the verb lead, which means to direct. The past tense of the verb lead is led, which means directed. However, there's another word pronounced led, which is spelled the same as lead, L-E-A-D. This lead is a noun describing a kind of metal. So always be careful as to which lead you're using. If you're using led as a verb, meaning directed, someone led a group on an expedition, for example, you spell it L-E-D. If you're referring to the metal, the grayish metal that is called lead, it is spelled L-E-A-D. These two words are pronounced somewhat differently, and they have different meanings, but people often confuse them. Loose, with two O's, is usually used as an adjective, meaning slack. These pants are loose on me. Lose, with only one O, is usually used as a verb, meaning to mislay or perhaps to be defeated in a contest. These two words are pronounced the same, past and past. Past, spelled P-A-S-S-E-D, is the past tense of the verb pass, and it means went by. Past, spelled P-A-S-T, is a noun referring to a previous time. It can also be used as an adjective referring to something from a previous time. But P-A-S-S-E-D, remember, is part of the verb. Peace, spelled P-E-A-C-E, means tranquility. It's the opposite of war. Peace, spelled P-I-E-C-E, means a part, a piece of pie, for example. Poor and poor are pronounced the same, but they have different meanings. Pour, spelled P-O-R-E, means to study. It's often used in the expression to pour over some papers. Pour, spelled P-O-U-R, means to spill. Pour a cup of coffee, for example. Precede, spelled P-R-E-C-E-D-E, means to go before. Proceed, P-R-O-C-E-E-D, is pronounced slightly differently, and it means to go ahead. When one person precedes another in a parade, for example, that means that one person goes before the other. Both of them proceed down the street together, however. Principal and principal are two different words with somewhat different meanings. Principal, spelled with P-A-L at the end, is an adjective or a noun meaning chief. It's usually used as a noun to mean the leader of a school. Principle, spelled P-L-E, is a noun meaning a rule. There are certain important principles of science that every physics student needs to know. One easy way of remembering the P-A-L spelling of the name of a person who's the head of the school is the saying, the principal is your pal. The word pal is spelled P-A-L, and it appears in the end of that word, principal, when it's used to mean the head of a school. There are three words that sound like rain. They're spelled differently, and they have slightly different meanings. R-A-I-N is the most common. That means precipitation, the stuff that falls down, the water that falls from the sky is rain, R-A-I-N. R-E-I-N, rein, that refers originally to the bridle of a horse. That is, the leather strap that you use to control a horse would be described as a rein or a set of reins. To reign, spelled this way, means to control. And R-E-I-G-N, reign, means rule in the sense that a king rules a country. It's a different type of control, but when reign is used in this way, it refers to a king or another leader who rules a country, whereas R-E-I-N refers to pulling back or holding back some powerful force, the way a rider uses the reins to hold back a horse. The meanings are somewhat similar, but fundamentally different, and therefore you need to distinguish between those two types of reign in particular. Here are two words that sound the same, but actually have opposite meanings. To raise, spelled R-A-I-S-E, means to lift up. To raze, R-A-Z-E, means to tear down. And it's usually used in reference to buildings. When a building needs to be torn down to be replaced by another building, we might speak of raising it, spelled with a Z. Here's another group of three words with different spellings and different meanings. Sight, spelled S-I-G-H-T, means vision, something that one sees or the ability to see. Site, spelled S-I-T-E, means a place. The site for a new office building, for example, would be the place where that building is going to be built. To cite, C-I-T-E, means to refer to something. When you're writing a paper for school, for example, you might cite a reference source. That is, you would refer to it or name the book from which a particular piece of information was drawn. Stationary and stationary look almost the same, but they're quite different in meaning. When stationary is spelled A-R-Y, it means still, not moving. Stationary, spelled E-R-Y, refers to paper and envelopes that you buy at a place called a stationery store. Here's another trio of words that sound the same but have different meanings. There, spelled T-H-E-I-R, means of them. You might speak of a married couple and their child, the child of them. There, T-H-E-R-E, means in that place. And there, spelled T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E, means they are. When you're using there in a sentence, ask yourself, could I substitute they are for there. If so, then you want the word with the apostrophe, T-H-E-Y-R-E. If you couldn't make that substitution, then one of the other two theirs is necessary. Here's another group of three, words that sound the same but are used very differently and are spelled differently. To, spelled T-O, is a preposition meaning toward, in the direction of. To, spelled T-O-O, is an adverb, which means also. T-W-O is usually used as a noun or an adjective, and it refers to the number two. Whether and weather sound almost the same, but have different meanings. Weather, spelled W-E-A-T-H-E-R, means the state of the atmosphere, if it's raining, sunny, or whatever. Weather, spelled W-H-E-T-H-E-R, means if. You might look outside to see whether it is sunny or raining. That would be spelled W-H-E-T-H-E-R. But you would look outside to see the weather, spelled W-E-A-T-H-E-R. And finally, your and your. Y-O-U-R is, again, a possessive adjective meaning of you, you and your best friend. Your, spelled Y-O-U'-R-E, means you are. Once again, when you use your in a sentence, stop and ask yourself, could I substitute the words you are for your? If so, then you want your with the apostrophe. Otherwise, use Y-O-U-R with no apostrophe. Once again, we gave you several sentences and challenged you to find any misspelled words they contain. Let's look at the first sentence. The American Civil Liberties Union works to defend freedom of speech and the other basic principles of our democratic society. The misspelled word here is principles. Remember that when principle refers to a rule, which is the use here, it should be spelled P-L-E at the end. So spelling it P-A-L-S is incorrect here. Remember that principal spelled with P-A-L usually refers to the head of a school. So if the American Civil Liberties Union went to court to defend the rights of a principal of a school, then it would be spelled P-A-L. But in this case, the sentence is talking about the basic rules of democracy, and therefore P-L-E would be the correct spelling for that kind of principle. Our next sentence, traces of lead have been found in early Italian pottery, causing some scientists to suspect an epidemic of lead poisoning among the ancient Romans. Here we have the word lead appearing twice, and as we saw, the word lead can often be confusing. Is it spelled correctly here? L-E-A-D is correct. In this sentence, lead refers to the grayish metal, which is somewhat poisonous and therefore shouldn't be used in a cooking or food utensil, but was used in such a way in ancient Rome. So lead has been spelled correctly here. Remember that when lead is being used as the past tense of the verb to lead, it's spelled L-E-D. But that's not the case here. So this sentence doesn't contain any spelling error. Next example. This empty lot will be the site of the new physics laboratory scheduled to be built in the next 2 years. Now remember from the lesson we saw that there are 3 ways to spell the word that is pronounced sight. The way it's spelled in this sentence, S-I-G-H-T, isn't correct for this usage. Sight spelled that way means the power to see, vision, or something that you see. When we're talking about a location or a place, we want to spell sight S-I-T-E, and that would be the correct spelling here. Next, the reign of King Arthur is described in English legends as a time of unparalleled peace and prosperity. Well, we gave you 2 errors in this sentence, not just one. I hope you caught them both. The first error is with the spelling of reign, R-E-I-N. Remember that there are 3 different forms of the word reign. The way it's spelled here, R-E-I-N, would refer to the piece of leather that's used to hold back a horse, or it could be used as a verb meaning to restrain, control, or hold back. In this case, however, the author of the sentence is trying to use the word reign, spelled R-E-I-G-N, meaning the rule of a king. Since he's referring to the time when King Arthur ruled or reigned over England, it should be spelled with the G. The other misspelling is the word peace. Remember that peace, spelled P-I-E-C-E, means a bit or part of something. In this case, however, the author is talking about a time of peace, meaning of tranquility, the absence of war. So the correct spelling would be P-E-A-C-E. Final example. The third and fifth holes offer the most difficult challenge on this golf course. Here, course has been misspelled. C-O-A-R-S-E means rough, and it's an adjective. In this case, the word course is being used as a noun, and it's being used in this particular sentence to refer to a series of holes that go to make up a game of golf, the place on which a game of golf is played. That noun is spelled C-O-U-R-S-E, and that spelling would have to be corrected to make the sentence correct. Did you catch all these spelling errors? If not, take a look at the lesson and remind yourself of the principles behind the differentiation among all these different words that sound similar but are spelled differently. And when you're ready, move on to the next lesson. Changing nouns from singular to plural sometimes leads to tricky spelling situations. The following rules will help. Most nouns become plural simply by adding s. Thus, car becomes plural by adding s and turning it into cars. House becomes plural by adding s and turning it into houses. And nation becomes plural by adding s and turning it into nations. In some cases, add es if the plural noun is pronounced with an extra syllable. So, for example, we refer to one glass, two glasses. Notice that the word glass is only one syllable long, whereas glasses has two syllables in it. Therefore, we need to add es at the end of the word glass to turn it from singular to plural. In the same way, we refer to one dish, two dishes. Dish is a one-syllable word. Dishes is a two-syllable word. Therefore, we add es to the end of dish to turn it into the plural dishes. So far, so simple. Now it gets a little more complicated. Some nouns have irregular plurals. That is, plurals that are formed in a different way that's hard to predict. You just have to memorize these few difficult irregular plurals. Luckily, there aren't too many common words in English that have irregular plurals. Here are the most common. Man becomes plural by turning it into men. Woman becomes plural by turning it into women. Child becomes children. Foot becomes feet. Mouse becomes mice. And louse becomes lice. If you memorize these few irregular plurals, you'll know most of the irregular plurals that are likely to come up in the sentences you write. Some nouns have singular and plural forms that are the same. For some reason, the most common examples all refer to animals. Here they are: fish, deer, sheep. Whether you're referring to one fish or many fish, one deer or many deer, one sheep or many sheep, we use the same word. In some cases, plurals are formed differently depending on the last letter of the word. Here are the rules you need to know. Nouns ending in a vowel plus y add s to form the plural. In other words, they follow the usual rule. Thus, the word boy, which ends in the vowel o plus the letter y, turns into the plural form simply by adding s, boys. In the same way, key becomes keys, and monkey becomes monkeys. However, nouns ending in a consonant plus y form the plural differently. The y is usually changed to I, and then es is added. So, for example, consider the word berry. This ends with the consonant r and the vowel y. To make it plural, we change the y to I and add es. So berry becomes berries. In the same way, emergency becomes emergencies, and company becomes companies. The letter O can also be tricky at the end of a word. Some nouns ending in a consonant plus O form the plural by adding es. For example, potato becomes potatoes, and veto becomes vetoes. Unfortunately, there are some exceptions. There are some words that end in a consonant plus O, which form the plural simply by adding s with no e. The most common examples are pianos, solos, and sopranos. Notice that all three have to do with music. Maybe that will help you to remember them. Most nouns that end in a vowel plus o simply add s. For example, radio, which ends in the vowel I plus o, becomes plural simply by adding s, radios. In the same way, stereo becomes plural simply by adding s, stereos. Finally, some English words use a foreign plural form. Remember that the English language borrows lots of words from other languages, and those other languages have their own ways of forming plurals. And in a few cases, the English language still follows the foreign rule for whatever reason. Here are the most common words that you need to know which use a foreign plural form. The singular word medium refers to a form of communication. Television, for example, is a communications medium. The plural form is media, M-E-D-I-A. People often talk about the media, by which they mean, for example, television, movies, radio, the internet, the print media, such as books and magazines, and so forth. When you hear people talking about the media, they are really talking about all the different media, each one of which is a medium. So media is a plural word, referring to one medium and another medium and yet another. Another singular word that follows the foreign rule for pluralization is phenomenon. A phenomenon is a happening. When you're referring to more than one phenomenon, we call it phenomena. The on at the end turns into a. So when we are speaking of more than one phenomenon, we speak of phenomena, unusual phenomena, for example. A criterion is a rule or yardstick. Again, when we want to turn this into a plural, we change the on at the end into an a. So when we're referring to more than one rule or yardstick, we refer to criteria, the criteria by which we judge whether a movie is good or not. The most important criterion, however, might be the acting. Finally, the word crisis means a turning point or a time of difficulty. We turn it into a plural by turning the final I into an E, crises. Richard Nixon wrote a book about his political career which referred to several crises through which he had lived. One last point under the pluralization issue. There are a couple of words in English that people often confuse as to whether they are singular or plural. So we put these under the heading of, is it singular or plural? Take the word data, for example. Technically, the word data is a plural word. It refers to several pieces of information. A single piece of information, if you want to refer to that, would be called a datum, D-A-T-U-M. That's the singular form of data. It's rarely used, however. The important thing to remember is when you do refer to data, that you are using a plural word. So, for example, if you were writing a paper about a scientific experiment, you might say the data are complex. You would use the plural verb are, not a singular verb, because data is plural. Well, now that you've seen these rules about how to turn singular words into plural words and spell them correctly, try the exercise, which will give you a chance to test your knowledge of these rules. When you're done, come back and we'll see how well you did with the exercise. For this exercise, we gave you a number of singular nouns and simply asked you to create the plural form. If you understood the rules in the lesson, you probably didn't find this exercise too difficult. Let's see how well you did. First, studio. How do we turn this into a plural? Well, remember our rule that most nouns ending in a vowel plus O turn into a plural simply by adding S, and that would be correct here. So studio becomes studios simply by adding an S, and the correct spelling would be S-T-U-D-I-O-S. Next, pony. Well, remember most nouns that end in a consonant plus Y turn into a plural by transforming the Y into an I and then adding ES. So the correct spelling of ponies is P-O-N-I-E-S. Next, bunch. Well, when you turn bunch into bunches, notice that an extra syllable gets added. So you are adding an S, but because bunch turns into bunches and becomes a one turning into a two-syllable word, we have to add ES. So the correct spelling of bunches is B-U-N-C-H-E-S. Remember that when adding the S adds another syllable onto the word, you add ES rather than simply the letter S. Next, dear. This is a little bit of a tricky question. Remember that dear is one of those few unusual words that have the same form in both singular and plural. So the singular form is dear, the plural form is also dear. Next, zero. How do we turn zero into zeros? Well, most nouns that end in a consonant plus the letter O turn into a plural by adding ES, and that would be correct with zeros. The right spelling is Z-E-R-O-E-S. Crisis. How do we turn crisis into a plural? Remember that crisis is one of a handful of English words that use a foreign form for the plural. So rather than turning crisis into crisises, for example, we simply change the final I into an E. The correct plural of crisis is crises, C-R-I-S-E-S. How do we make tray into a plural? Well, this is a word that ends in a Y, but remember, our unusual or special rule only applies to a word that ends in a consonant plus Y. When a word ends in a vowel plus Y, we simply add an S as usual. So tray becomes plural by simply adding an S and turning it into trays. Our next question was a truly tricky one. Here's an example of an irregular English plural that we didn't provide to you in the lesson. Perhaps you knew this. If not, you might have noticed it if you looked it up in a dictionary. The plural of ox is not oxes, but rather oxen. We gave in the lesson a few examples of some unusual irregular English plurals: men, women, children, feet, mice, and lice. Oxen is one more example to add to your list. Our next question, triangle. How do we turn this into a plural? This is a very easy one. This is, in fact, the only truly normal word on this list. Simply add an S at the end, triangle becomes triangles. Good job. Turn to the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk about one final aspect of spelling, namely capitalization. Capitalization refers to using a large letter at the beginning of a particular word. Now, the rules for capitalization can be very complicated, and they do vary from one type of publication or one situation to another. In fact, for example, newspapers and magazines often have their own style manuals, which are guides that their writers and editors follow, which cover rules such as capitalization, and they may have their own specific form of capitalization, which may differ from what other magazines and newspapers follow. Your teacher may ask you to use a particular style manual in writing papers for his or her class, and if so, you'll want to look at the rules on capitalization that are provided in that specific style manual. What we're going to do in this lesson is provide the basic rules for capitalization. We're not going to try to get into all the possible details that we could address, but we'll provide you with some basic rules which will cover 90% of the situations that are likely to arise in your writing and which you won't make any serious mistakes if you follow. Here they are. First, always capitalize the first word of a sentence. Next, capitalize the name of a specific person, place, or organization. For example, you would capitalize the first letter in each of these names: Brad Pitt, Minneapolis, Swarthmore College. If you're not referring to a specific person, place, or organization, you would use a lowercase letter. So, for example, if you were writing a sentence that simply referred to colleges in the United States, you would not capitalize the word college because a specific college is not being referred to. Capitalize the name of a day, month, or holiday. For example, you would always capitalize the first letter of Saturday, April, Columbus Day. Don't capitalize the names of seasons. So, for example, use a lowercase letter for the beginning of the words spring and autumn. Capitalize the names of historical eras or events. For example, each of these terms would be capitalized: World War II, the Renaissance, the Cultural Revolution. This last phrase refers to an era from modern Chinese history. Notice that the word "the" usually is not capitalized. Only the main word in these titles is capitalized. Always capitalize the name of a nationality or region. For example, you would capitalize the first letter in Korean, the Mideast, the Northwest Territory. Don't capitalize directions. This is different from describing a region. When you're using a directional name to describe a place on the globe, a particular area of the world, such as the Mideast, you would capitalize it. But when simply referring to a direction of the compass, you would not capitalize it. So, for example, in this sentence, we do not capitalize the word west. Go west, young man. Here, the word west is not referring to a region known as the West. Instead, it's simply pointing in a particular direction, and therefore capitalization is not used. Capitalize a rank or title when joined to a name. For example, we would capitalize the ranks or titles in the following phrases: President Bush, Secretary General Kofi Annan, Archbishop Moore. Titles and ranks are usually not capitalized when they're not joined to names. For example, in this sentence, the president addressed the crowd. The word president is not capitalized. Of course, it would be if it said President Bush addressed the crowd. Finally, capitalize the first word and other important words in the titles of works of art. Here are some examples. The Old Man and the Sea. This is the name of a famous novel. The first word is the, so we capitalize the T. Old, man, and sea are all important words, and they are capitalized as well. Another example. Arrangement in Black and Gray. This is the name of a famous painting. In fact, you probably know the painting by the name of Whistler's Mother. The actual title is Arrangement in Black and Gray. The first word, arrangement, is capitalized, and so are the important words black and gray. Here's the title of a piece of music: Symphony in D major. Symphony, D, and major are all capitalized. Notice that in all of these examples, we did not capitalize words like and or. We did not capitalize articles, which includes the, a, and an we did not capitalize prepositions. The rule is that prepositions that are shorter than 5 letters should not be capitalized when they appear in titles. A preposition that is 5 letters long or longer should be capitalized. A word that's that long looks a little strange in the title when it is not capitalized. So, for example, if you were writing the title of a work that included the preposition through, which is longer than 5 letters, you would capitalize the T at the beginning of through. Otherwise, most prepositions, which are shorter than 5 letters, are not capitalized. So words like to, in, for, by, from, and so on would not be capitalized unless, of course, they happen to be the first word of the title. So these are the most important basic rules for when you capitalize words. Otherwise, don't capitalize words that appear in your sentences. It's not necessary. After you've absorbed these rules, try your hand at the exercise that tests your understanding of capitalization. When you're done, come back and we'll see how well you did on the exercise. Here we gave you several sentences, and in some cases words are correctly capitalized, in some cases they are not. Your job is to find all the errors and correct them. Let's take a look at each sentence. First, my favorite book is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Pirsig. Okay, here we have a sentence that includes the title of a work of art, namely a book. So we know that there's an important rule that's going to need to be followed. Let's take a look at this sentence and see whether capitalization has been done correctly. The first word of the sentence, my, is capitalized, as it should be, so that's fine. Now let's look at the title, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The first word of the title, Zen, has been capitalized, and that's correct. The author of this sentence has also capitalized the word motorcycle. Well, that's also correct, because that's one of the important words in the title. But the other words have not been capitalized. Is that correct or not? Well, the words and the should not be capitalized, and neither should the word of. Those are short words, and is one of the kinds of words that we taught you in the lesson shouldn't be capitalized. The is an article, and of is a short preposition, and none of those should be capitalized. However, the other words in the title are all important and should be capitalized. So the word art should be capitalized, and the word maintenance should also be capitalized. Now, the sentence ends with the name of the author of the book, and the names of specific people should always be capitalized. So Robert should have a capital R, the middle initial M should be capitalized, and the P in Pirsig should also be capitalized. So there are 5 letters in this sentence that need to be turned from small letters into capital letters, and I hope you caught them all. Next example. The 3 senators were greeted at the airport by Mayor Bloomberg and his young assistant. Okay, here we have a sentence that includes a number of titles. Which ones should be capitalized and which ones shouldn't? First of all, the first word of the sentence, the, is capitalized as it should be. Then we have the word senators, the 3 senators. This is a rank or title. Should it be capitalized? Well, remember our rule. Normally, when a rank or title is not connected to a name, it should not be capitalized. So the lowercase s, the non-capital S, is correct in this sentence. So senators would not be capitalized. What about Mayor Bloomberg? The name Bloomberg is capitalized, as it should be. What about mayor? That's his rank or title. In this sentence, mayor is not capitalized. Should it be? Remember our rule, that when a rank or title is connected to a name, it normally should be capitalized. So the M in mayor, in this case, should be capitalized. There's one other title that's mentioned here, Mayor Bloomberg and his young assistant. Assistant is another rank or title. Should it be capitalized? Once again, it's not connected to a name, so therefore it shouldn't be capitalized. By the way, you might have noticed the word airport and thought, maybe that should be capitalized. After all, it refers to a place. But only the name of a specific place should be capitalized. If the sentence referred to Kennedy Airport, for example, then Kennedy and airport would both be capitalized, because here a specific airport is being named. In this sentence, however, it simply says the 3 senators were greeted at the airport. No specific airport is being referred to, so a lowercase, non-capital A for airport is correct. So in this particular sentence, only one change needs to be made to make it correct. The M in mayor should be capitalized. In our next sentence, again, only one change is needed. Let's see if you caught it. Many people consider Labor Day weekend the last celebration of summer. Now, remember that the names of specific days, months, or holidays should be capitalized. So Labor Day should be capitalized, L and D, and the way the sentence is written, it was capitalized, so that's correct. Now, what about weekend? Should the W in weekend be capitalized? After all, that's referring to a particular day. Labor Day weekend would be the Saturday, Sunday, and Labor Day Monday itself. But no, not really. The weekend in Labor Day weekend is not strictly part of the holiday. Only the names of days like Saturday, Sunday, Monday should be capitalized, as well as the name of the actual holiday, such as Labor Day. So if you were referring to Labor Day weekend, the evening of Labor Day, the day before Labor Day, you wouldn't capitalize any of those other words. Only Labor Day itself should be capitalized. However, there is another error in the sentence. The word summer here has been capitalized, and many students make the mistake of capitalizing the names of seasons. After all, they figure, if May, June, and July should be capitalized, why shouldn't summer, spring, and winter be capitalized? However, that's not correct. The names of seasons are specifically not capitalized, and therefore the lowercase s should be used. The initial word in the sentence, of course, is capitalized M. That's correct. So with that one change the S of summer from capital to lowercase, the sentence would be correct. Our next sentence also contains the title of a work of art. The Garden of Delights by Hieronymus Bosch is one of the most unusual paintings of the Middle Ages. Let's start with that title. It comes first in the sentence, and let's see whether it's been capitalized correctly. The Garden of Delights is the name of the work. It's a painting, and remember our rule, the first word in the title and all the important words should be capitalized. So the should be capitalized. What about garden? Is that an important word? Clearly it is. What about of? Well, no, that's not. That's a short preposition. Remember that prepositions of less than 5 letters should not be capitalized. So this capital O should be turned into a small o. What about delights? Is that an important word? Yes, it is. So the capital D is correct. The sentence goes on to say, by Hieronymus Bosch, and Hieronymus Bosch is the name of a specific person, and so the capital H and the capital B are correct. Is there anything else in the sentence that needs changing? Well, yes. The sentence ends by referring to one of the most unusual paintings of the Middle Ages. Remember what we learned. A historical era or event should be capitalized. The Middle Ages is certainly an historical era. So Middle Ages should be capitalized. Capital M and capital A should be used in referring to this particular era of history. So 3 changes need to be made to make this sentence correct. Change the capital O in of to lowercase and make Middle Ages capitalized, capital M and capital A. Now our last sentence. Before being named president of the university, Professor Meyer taught at several other colleges in New England. Well, we've got some places here, we've got a person being named, as well as some ranks and titles. Let's see whether capitalization has been done correctly here. Let's start with the first phrase. Before being named president of the university. Well, here we have a rank or title, president. Is it connected to a name? In this case, it isn't. It doesn't say President Meyer. It just says before being named president of the university. And normally, a title or rank is not capitalized when it's not connected to a name. So we want to change president into a lowercase p rather than a capital P. What about president of the university? Remember we said that the name of a specific organization would be capitalized. Is a specific organization being referred to here? Well, no, it simply says the university. We don't know what university is being referred to. Suppose it said Columbia University. Then there would be a specific organization being referred to, and Columbia University, both of those words would be capitalized. But when we simply refer to the university, it's not a specific organization, so we have lowercase u instead. That's a second change that needs to be made. Okay, the sentence goes on to refer to Professor Meyer. Now, Meyer, of course, is capitalized. That's the name of a specific person. What about professor? It's lowercase here. Is that correct? It's a rank or title, and in this case, it is connected to the name of the person, Professor Meyer. Therefore, it should be capitalized. The P in professor should be a capital P. So that's another change that needs to be made. Finally, the sentence says that Professor Meyer taught at several other colleges in New England. Now, what about the word colleges there? It's the name of an organization. Should it be capitalized? No, because a specific college is not being referred to, rather a group of several other unnamed colleges. Finally, the sentence refers to New England. That is a region of the country, and a region or nationality should always be capitalized. England has been capitalized, but the author of the sentence forgot to capitalize new, and it should also be capitalized because the name of the region being referred to here is not England, it's New England. That's what we call those 6 states in the northeastern part of the United States. Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts constitute New England. So those 6 states make up a specific region, and the whole title of the region, New England, should be capitalized. So in this sentence, we actually need to make 4 changes. President and university should be lowercase, professor and new should be capitalized. I hope you caught all those changes. If you did, you can consider yourself an expert in capitalization. It would be really nice if English spelling were simple, logical, and clear. But it isn't, and it's not going to become that way. So this is something you simply have to work at and practice in order to become good at it. Misspellings do make your writing look bad, and people who notice the spelling errors will think you're not very bright. It's not fair to judge people's writing that way, but it's something that people tend to do. So do work at spelling words correctly to make your sentences and your pieces of writing look smarter, more correct, and have people take them more seriously. Here are a couple of final tips that can help you become a better speller. Number 1, don't be afraid to use the dictionary. One of the reasons dictionaries were invented was to make it easy to look up the correct spelling of difficult words. And when you sit down to begin writing a piece of work, whether it's for school, for your job, or any other purpose, get into the habit of pulling the dictionary off the shelf and putting it on the desk next to you. And that way, it'll be easy to look up any word that you are in doubt about. If the dictionary is up on the shelf, out of reach, when you set to work writing and you come upon a word that you're not quite sure about, it's very tempting to simply put down your best guess and not bother to get up from the chair and pull down the dictionary. Getting the dictionary and putting it next to you before you begin work will guarantee that you're more likely to actually use the dictionary and therefore correct misspelled words as you write. My second tip is this: get a little notebook and begin keeping a list of words that you misspell. Whenever you get a paperback from a teacher, for example, if the teacher has pointed out one or more words that you've misspelled, write down the correct spelling of those words in your notebook. Review the notebook from time to time and add to it every time you catch yourself misspelling a word. Chances are good that the words you write in your spelling notebook will be words that you'll come to learn sooner or later, and in time, you'll never misspell them again. So the sooner you begin keeping your own personal spelling notebook, the sooner you will banish your own personal spelling demons and improve the accuracy of the spelling you do in your own writing. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot out of the techniques for spelling and capitalization that we taught you in this program. And I look forward to seeing you and working with you on other grammar topics as you review the other programs in Video Aided Instruction's English Grammar Series.